The conference room buzzed with a low, confident energy, men leaning back in their chairs, fingers drumming on tables, their voices a mix of bragging and laughter. The SEALs were at ease in their element, recounting recent operations with the kind of swagger only battle-hardened warriors could carry. Each story was met with exaggerated gestures, mock salutes, and quiet chuckles from those who had yet to earn the right to speak. It was a theater of dominance, a carefully curated stage where strength, skill, and intimidation were currency, and everyone in the room knew the rules. Then the door opened. For a moment, no one noticed. The room's collective attention was wrapped up in a story about a daring raid. But then, like a shadow slipping into the spotlight, Captain Riley Morgan stepped across the threshold. Her uniform was crisp, perfectly pressed, the insignia of a Marine captain gleaming in the harsh fluorescent light. But it was the bruise along her jawline that caught every eye, a vivid purplish mark, stark against her otherwise immaculate appearance. A subtle hush rippled through the room. Men shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their conversations trailing off mid-word. Eyes darted between the bruise and her calm, measured expression. Some tried to smirk, some quickly looked away, but all had noticed. She was not just a Marine, she was someone who had survived a storm and walked through it without flinching. Riley moved with the kind of quiet authority that demanded attention without shouting for it. Each step was measured, deliberate, almost ritualistic. The air seemed to thicken with every motion she made. Whispers started, soft but growing. Is she here for a briefing? She looks fierce. What happened to her? One of the senior SEALs, a broad-shouldered man with a graying beard and a permanent scowl, broke the silence. His tone was casual but edged with challenge. Think she's here to lecture us? The comment landed in the room like a stone in water, ripples spreading out intense amusement. Some of the younger SEALs chuckled quietly, assuming her silence was fear, a meekness easily mocked. But Riley didn't react. She simply smiled faintly, a smile that held no warmth but a quiet confidence that unsettled the room. She approached the briefing table. Her hands rested lightly on the polished wood, her fingers splayed as if to silently claim a space she had earned before even speaking. The SEALs tried to mask their unease, shifting in their seats, tightening their grips on the edges of the chairs, attempting to reclaim the air of dominance that Riley had quietly stolen. Riley opened her folder, the crisp snap of its opening echoing slightly in the room. She didn't need to speak. Her presence alone demanded attention. Finally, she looked up and spoke, her voice calm but authoritative, carrying across the silent room. Gentlemen, I understand there have been questions about recent operational outcomes. Let's clarify a few things. The words were simple, unassuming even, but they carried weight. Her tone didn't beg respect, it commanded it. And for the first time that day, the room's laughter died completely. One of the younger SEALs, emboldened by bravado and the subtle smirk of inexperience, decided to break the tension with a jab. "You're injured," he said, nodding toward the bruise on her jaw. "Looks like someone finally got the better of you." The words hung in the air, dripping with arrogance. A ripple of suppressed chuckles moved through the room. They didn't realize they had just poked a hornet's nest. Riley's eyes met his, unwavering, and the temperature of the room dropped. Her jaw tightened slightly, just enough to hint at controlled anger. Then she said something that silenced even the bravest of them. "You think a bruise defines my ability? Watch closely." With that, she set down her folder and pulled out a tablet, swiping to a series of tactical maps. The screen illuminated her face, highlighting the sharp angles of her features, the bruise now almost irrelevant against the intensity of her gaze. She began walking through the details of a recent joint mission, a complex operation deep in hostile territory, where her Marine unit had been tasked with extracting a high-value target while under enemy fire. As she spoke, the room shifted. Every word was precise, every strategy backed by meticulous data. She highlighted critical moments where her leadership had turned potential disaster into success, detailing how her decision saved not just her team, but also 3 SEALs who had found themselves pinned under crossfire. The initial smirk on the young SEAL's face faded. Whispers became muted exclamations of disbelief. Heads turned subtly toward one another, the laughter of minutes ago replaced by the realization of what had just walked into their midst. Riley didn't pause, didn't hesitate. She recounted enemy positions, extracted intelligence, coordinated evacuation routes, all with calm authority. The SEALs, trained to handle extreme pressure, found themselves struggling to keep up with her clarity, her foresight, her command presence. By the time she finished, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. The junior SEAL who had dared mock her first now clenched his jaw, eyes darting nervously. The senior SEAL, the one with the graying beard, leaned back slowly in his chair, a mixture of curiosity and grudging respect in his gaze. Riley folded her hands atop the table and allowed herself a brief pause. She scanned the room, letting her presence settle over them like a tangible force. If anyone thinks leadership is about intimidation, now you've seen the alternative, she said, her tone steady, calm, and almost melodic in its authority. And then, just as the SEALs were beginning to adjust to her, to reconcile her calm dominance with the bruise they had mocked, she added, almost quietly, "Respect isn't given because of rank, respect is earned, and if you want to see true respect, watch carefully." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Every man in that room felt the shift, the smirks, the arrogance, the unspoken hierarchy, all of it threatened by a bruised woman Marine who didn't need to shout, who didn't need to prove herself, and yet had already proven more than any of them could have imagined. For the first time that day, the room was no longer theirs, and as Riley walked toward the corner to prepare her next move, everyone wondered, what would she do next to command respect from America's most elite warriors? The question lingered, the suspense was palpable, and no one, not a single SEAL, dared speak. The room still hummed with tension after Riley's entrance. The SEALs, used to controlling every conversation, every moment, now found themselves unsettled by her mere presence. Their smirks and swagger felt out of place in the heavy, expectant silence. Riley didn't give them time to recover. Without a word, she tapped her tablet, bringing up mission footage, raw, unedited, real-time clips from the recent operation she had described moments before. The images flickered across the screen, dusty desert terrain, flashes of gunfire, explosions sending plumes of smoke into the air. Marines and SEALs moved in coordinated chaos, but it was Riley's voice guiding every frame. "Here," she said, pointing to a clip showing a SEAL pinned under rubble, "he was trapped. Our extraction team was delayed. We had less than 30 seconds to react." The SEALs watched, stunned, as her recounting revealed the precise calculations she had made under fire. Angles, timings, and contingencies that even the most seasoned warriors would struggle to anticipate. Her words weren't bragging, they were facts. Cold, precise, undeniable. One of the younger SEALs muttered under his breath, "She saved us." Riley didn't acknowledge him. She continued, calmly walking them through her thought process, highlighting every decision, every split-second choice that had ensured survival. Maps were overlaid with movement patterns, and her voice carried authority that couldn't be challenged. Then she paused, her sharp gaze sweeping the room. "Now let's test your understanding," she said. The words were simple, but they carried a loaded weight. This was no casual briefing. This was a challenge, and Riley's calm tone masked the storm she was about to unleash. She handed out a series of hypothetical tactical scenarios, complex, multi-layered, and nearly impossible to solve without precise coordination and creative thinking. Each SEAL was given a role. Plan an extraction route. You have enemy reinforcements approaching, civilians in the perimeter, and limited intel, she said. Her gaze swept the room. You have 10 minutes, go. The SEALs exchanged confident glances, thinking this would be easy. After all, they were the Navy's finest, elite operators trained for chaos. But Riley had designed scenarios that mirrored the unpredictability of real combat, where arrogance could kill as easily as the enemy. 10 minutes passed and the SEAL's initial confidence began to crumble. Maps were spread across the table, markers moved and removed, strategies argued over. Voices raised, frustration mounting. Every plan they proposed revealed gaps, vulnerabilities, blind spots, things Riley had anticipated in advance. Riley walked slowly among them, observing without interfering. Every fumble, every hesitation, every overlooked variable was noted. Yet she didn't scold. She didn't correct. She simply watched, her presence a quiet pressure, a subtle reminder that the room had shifted. The energy was no longer theirs. Finally, one of the senior SEALs slammed his hand on the table. "This is impossible," he barked, frustration breaking his composed facade. "You want us to solve a situation that's—" Riley interrupted him with a calm, cutting precision. "It's not impossible. You're just thinking too small. Adjust your perspective. Factor in the unknown. And remember, a leader doesn't wait for the perfect scenario, they adapt in real time." Her words were simple, yet every SEAL felt the sting. They were trained to lead in chaos, but Riley had just exposed a weakness none of them wanted to admit. They underestimated her. She stepped to the center of the room, letting her eyes scan each man. "Watch carefully." Then she moved to one of the maps, her fingers tracing routes with deliberate accuracy. Within minutes, she had turned confusion into clarity. Routes were optimized, contingencies accounted for, extraction points secured. Where the SEALs had argued and doubted, Riley had executed and resolved. The room was silent. Even the most skeptical operators felt a shift, an unsettling acknowledgement of skill, courage, and leadership they had failed to anticipate. A junior SEAL, still recovering from disbelief, whispered, I didn't think she could do that." Another muttered, more to himself than anyone else, "We've been wrong about everything." Riley didn't pause. She turned back to the SEALs, her voice calm but resonant. "You've trained for years, and yet when faced with real-world unpredictability, you hesitate. Leadership isn't just about strength or skill, it's about clarity, decisiveness, and adaptability. Those are qualities earned, not assumed." The senior SEAL who had mocked her first tried to mask his respect with sarcasm. "So, what now? We just follow orders." Riley's gaze sliced through the pretense. "Not follow, observe, learn, and when it's your turn, lead with the same discipline you demand from others." A tense pause followed. The room was thick with unspoken acknowledgement. For the first time, the SEALs realized they were not the ones in control. Not entirely. Riley had introduced a new variable, a presence, a force, a standard, that they had no choice but to reckon with. Then Riley added, almost in passing, "Respect isn't given lightly. It's tested, challenged, and proven under fire. If you want to understand what it means to truly earn respect—" Her eyes locked onto the group leader, the one who had first underestimated her. "Watch closely." And with that, she moved to a corner of the room, pulling out a small, unassuming kit. Inside were a series of tools, tactical puzzles, small obstacles, and devices designed to test problem-solving under pressure. It was a simulation of the kind of split-second decision-making that separated ordinary soldiers from extraordinary leaders. The SEALs eyed the kit with skepticism. One muttered, "You're going to challenge us with toys." Riley didn't respond. She simply set up the first scenario, demonstrating the rules with clarity and precision. Then she gestured to the SEALs. "Your turn." What followed was chaos. The SEALs, confident in their superior strength and experience, underestimated the complexity of Riley's test. Time slipped away. Mistakes mounted. Panic surfaced in the smallest forms. A misaligned wire, a wrong calculation, a delayed reaction, and Riley observed silently, nodding every misstep. Then she stepped in, not to scold, not to correct, but to demonstrate. Her hands moved with practiced precision, her mind orchestrating multiple variables simultaneously. Within moments, what had seemed impossible became solvable, organized, even elegant. The SEALs watched, stunned, as their confidence gave way to awe. By the time Riley stepped back, the room had transformed. Where there had been arrogance and mockery, there was now something quieter, more powerful, respect tinged with disbelief. A young SEAL leaned toward his partner, whispering, "She's unreal. I've never seen anyone do that." Riley turned her gaze to the room, calm and composed. "This isn't about proving who's stronger. It's about understanding who can adapt, who can lead, and who can earn respect under pressure. The lesson isn't over." The senior SEAL, the one who had mocked her first, clenched his jaw. His smirk was gone, replaced by a mixture of grudging respect and unease. For the first time, he realized the bruise on Riley's jawline wasn't a mark of weakness. It was proof of resilience, of survival, of experience that could outmatch even the most seasoned warriors in the room. And just as the SEALs began to reconcile their disbelief, Riley leaned slightly forward, her voice dropping almost to a whisper that carried like a thunderclap. "Now, let's see who really deserves the last word." The room froze. Every man, trained for decades to command in crisis, now faced a moment of uncertainty unlike any before. Riley had shifted the balance of power, not with force, not with intimidation, but with presence, skill, and undeniable competence. Riley stood at the edge of the room, letting the tension she had built settle over the SEALs like a thick fog. Their initial arrogance had dissolved, replaced with something new, uncertainty. Some glanced at one another, trying to reclaim composure. Others simply stared, captivated, as Riley methodically prepared the next part of her demonstration. The small tactical kit she had brought out earlier now took center stage. Riley carefully laid out the contents: wires, locks, small explosive simulations, and communication devices. It looked innocuous at first glance, almost like a puzzle meant for children. But the truth was far more intimidating. Each item was a test of agility, focus, and precision under pressure, skills the SEALs prided themselves on. Yet Riley had designed challenges that pushed beyond the limits of routine training. "You think this is simple," she said, voice calm but authoritative. "It's not. This is about strategy, observation, and speed. You may think you know your limits, but tonight we'll find out just how much you underestimate them." She selected the first puzzle, a series of wires connected to a timer. The objective was straightforward: defuse the simulation before time ran out. She demonstrated the correct sequence, moving with a fluidity that made the task look effortless. Fingers danced over the wires, tools clicked with precision, and within seconds the timer was neutralized. The SEALs watched in stunned silence. Then Riley looked at them, her eyes locking onto the senior operator who had mocked her. "Your turn." Confidently, the first SEAL stepped forward. His hands were steady, his jaw set in determination. He traced the wires, recalling every training exercise he had ever completed. Time ticked. Sweat beaded at his temple. And yet, when he pulled the wrong wire, the timer started a loud, piercing beep. Frustration and surprise spread across his face. Riley didn't intervene. She simply observed, her presence like a calm storm silently forcing focus. Another SEAL stepped up. Same result: hesitation, a wrong move, panic rising like heat in the room. Each attempt revealed a startling truth. This was not a test of brute strength or experience alone. It was a test of clarity under pressure, of adaptability, and the ability to remain composed when failure threatened at every turn. After several failed attempts, Riley stepped forward again. Her movements were deliberate, precise, a combination of practiced skill and strategic thinking. With a flick of her wrist, she neutralized the timer in seconds. The SEALs watched, mouths slightly open, as she explained each step: why she chose one wire over another, how she anticipated a potential trap, and how she mentally processed variables under stress. Then she raised her eyes, scanning the room. Leadership isn't about dominating a situation with force. It's about understanding the variables, anticipating failure, and guiding others without losing control. The weight of her words hit harder than any physical drill. Every SEAL felt it, not just in their minds but in their chest, the way adrenaline and respect intertwine. The demonstration didn't stop there. Riley moved on to the next scenario, a simulated hostage rescue. It was simple in theory but devilishly complex in execution. Small obstacles blocked pathways, hostages were placed strategically, and multiple threats were simulated with alarms and timed challenges. The SEALs were confident, after all, this was their domain. They had trained for this countless times, but Riley had anticipated every assumption. She quietly observed as the first SEAL attempted a rescue, moving aggressively and fast. In his rush, he triggered one of the simulated threats, sending the hostage into danger. Panic flared, and frustration followed immediately. Riley stepped in. She didn't yell or reprimand. She simply instructed step by step, showing the correct approach, measured, strategic, and fluid. Every movement was calculated. Every decision had a reason behind it. Within moments, she completed the simulation flawlessly, rescuing the hostage while neutralizing all threats, leaving the room in stunned silence. A junior SEAL whispered to his neighbor, barely audible, "I've never seen anyone move like that, not even in combat." Riley looked around the room, her eyes scanning every face. Some were red with frustration, others pale with disbelief. Even the senior operators, the ones who had laughed at her bruise earlier, were forced to acknowledge something they had resisted admitting. She was extraordinary. But Riley wasn't finished. Her final demonstration was the most subtle yet the most devastating. She called attention to the small details the SEALs had missed: communication gaps, tactical oversights, and human error. She didn't accuse. She simply illustrated the consequences. Each example was drawn from the operation she had led, moments when hesitation or poor judgment could have led to disaster. "You see," she said softly, her voice carrying through the room like a controlled current, "skill alone isn't enough. Discipline, awareness, and respect for your team, for the mission, for reality, are what separates the best from the rest. And respect," she added, eyes locking on the SEAL who had mocked her first, "is earned through competence and integrity, not bluster or ego." The tension in the room was almost tangible. Every SEAL, trained for chaos and conditioned to dominate, felt the quiet weight of their own inadequacies. Riley had not only proven herself but had done so in a way that left no room for argument, no room for doubt. A hushed silence settled over the room, broken only by the faint sound of breathing. Then one of the younger SEALs, unable to contain himself, whispered, She's not just good, she's perfect under pressure." Riley didn't respond. She simply gathered her tools, placing them neatly back into her kit. She took a step back and surveyed the room, calm and composed, as though she had just completed an ordinary task. The SEALs, meanwhile, were anything but ordinary. Their expressions were a mixture of awe, disbelief, and the first hints of respect. The senior SEAL, the one who had mocked her at the start, finally spoke, his voice quieter than usual, laced with reluctant admiration. "Okay, I admit it. You've handled this room better than anyone I've ever seen." Riley's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "And that's the point," she said. "Respect isn't automatic. It's earned through action, through leadership, and through proving yourself when everyone doubts you." A tense pause followed. The room was transformed. Where there had been arrogance, mockery, and ego, there was now humility, curiosity, and a newfound understanding of what it meant to lead. The SEALs were no longer in control. Riley had quietly claimed that mantle through competence, calm, and precision. But the lesson was not over. Riley's calm demeanor hinted at the next stage, the part that would test not just their minds but their physical limits. She had laid the groundwork, humbled them intellectually and strategically, but the real test was still to come. Her gaze swept over the SEALs one last time. "You've learned something today," she said, her voice low but commanding. but you're only seeing a fraction of what leadership under pressure really requires. Watch closely because this next part, she let her words linger, sharp and deliberate, is where true skill meets discipline. The room held its breath. Every SEAL knew instinctively that Riley was about to escalate the challenge, and no one was entirely sure who would come out on top. The room was heavy with anticipation. Riley had already dismantled the SEALs, confidence with strategy and intellect, but now she was about to push them where it truly mattered, their bodies, their endurance, and their instincts under pressure. She moved to the side of the room, where a set of compact physical challenge stations had been quietly assembled. A climbing wall, obstacle course, agility ladders, and marksmanship stations, all designed to test precision, speed, and stamina simultaneously. The SEALs eyed the setup skeptically. Some smirked, thinking the challenges were simple. After all, they were the Navy's elite. Riley's voice cut through the tense murmur. You've been trained for combat, for survival, for chaos. Let's see how well you perform when strategy meets execution. 10-minute intervals at each station. Fail and you start over. Success is precision, endurance, and discipline combined. Follow my lead or fall behind. The SEALs laughed nervously at the apparent simplicity of the instructions. That laughter quickly died as Riley stepped onto the first station herself. She began with the agility ladder. Her feet struck the rungs with rhythmic precision, knees high, arms pumping, her body a perfect balance of speed and control. Sweat began to glisten along her brow, but she didn't slow. Within seconds, she completed the ladder flawlessly, transitioning into the climbing wall. Every SEAL watched, stunned, as she ascended with the efficiency of a seasoned rock climber, calculating every handhold, every foothold, her muscles moving in perfect harmony. By the time she reached the top, the first SEAL had just stumbled on the agility ladder, fumbling and losing his rhythm. Riley paused at the top of the wall and looked down, calm and composed, sweat glistening on her uniform but her expression unflinching. "Keep up," she said softly. The words were simple but carried the weight of a command, an unspoken challenge. The SEALs scrambled. One after another attempted to match her pace. Their muscles burned, their hearts raced, but they struggled against a combination of fatigue and the mounting realization that Riley was on a different level entirely. Some fell, hands slipping from rungs, faces twisted in exertion. Others moved too fast, losing balance, making errors in judgment. Riley moved through the stations like a force of nature. From the climbing wall to the obstacle course, she demonstrated flawless technique. She scaled walls, ducked under barriers, and maneuvered through tight spaces with the precision of a predator and the grace of a dancer. The SEALs were sweating heavily now. Some gritted their teeth, others gasped for air. Their competitive instincts pushed them harder, but Riley's calm, methodical pace highlighted the limits of raw strength without strategy. Every step she took was a lesson, every movement a subtle reminder. Skill and composure outmatched brute force. At the marksmanship station, the challenge intensified. SEALs grabbed rifles, assumed positions, and attempted to hit targets at varying distances under simulated stress conditions. Riley's approach was quiet, methodical, her breathing controlled, movements precise. She fired a single round and the target fell dead center, every time. The SEALs attempted the same, but their hands shook, their breathing uneven. Targets were missed. Anger, frustration, and disbelief began to seep in. How could one Marine, bearing a bruise and no display of arrogance, outperform the Navy's elite under pressure? Riley didn't gloat. She simply observed, offering small adjustments, demonstrating without words how technique and calm surpass raw power. By the end of the exercise, the SEALs were exhausted, their uniforms soaked with sweat, but a quiet awe filled the room. One of the younger SEALs, panting and slumped against a wall, muttered, I didn't think it was possible." Another, equally breathless, whispered, She's unstoppable." Riley walked among them, inspecting their technique, correcting small errors and offering subtle guidance. Her touch was gentle but firm, her presence commanding. Even in exhaustion, the SEALs followed her instructions without hesitation, drawn by the undeniable authority she wielded without raising her voice. Then came the final test, a timed endurance course combining all elements: agility, climbing, obstacle navigation, and precision shooting, simulated under stress with alarms blaring, smoke filling parts of the room, and distractions designed to break focus. The first SEALs approached with confidence, fueled by stubborn pride. But the moment they began, chaos took hold. Rushing through obstacles, misjudging distances, fumbling weapons, they fell behind. Riley moved through the same course with unwavering composure, completing it flawlessly while correcting minor obstacles instinctively, as if anticipating them in advance. By the end, the SEALs were gasping, some collapsing to the floor, muscles trembling, faces red from exertion. Riley, despite sweat and exertion, stood tall, her uniform damp but her posture perfect, her breathing steady. The contrast was undeniable. A senior SEAL trying to mask humility muttered, She's relentless." Riley's gaze swept over the exhausted men. Relentless isn't about being the strongest. It's about discipline, control, and endurance under pressure. Strength without composure is wasted energy. Leadership isn't just tactical, it's physical, mental, and moral. Silence fell. The SEALs, trained for chaos, combat, and high-pressure operations, were humbled, not by brute force, but by the flawless execution of skill, focus, and leadership under strain. The senior SEAL who had mocked her at the beginning finally spoke, his voice low and unsteady. I didn't realize," he paused, searching for words. "I underestimated you." Riley simply nodded, her expression calm but piercing. And that, gentleman, is why respect must be earned, not assumed. Then, as the room's tension began to settle, Riley added a quiet, yet loaded sentence. "This is only a fraction of what it takes to lead under fire. One more stage remains, where precision, endurance, and strategy will meet the ultimate test. Watch closely." Every SEAL in the room straightened, exhausted but attentive. They knew instinctively that the final challenge would not only test their skills, but also solidify the lesson Riley had been imparting with every movement, every decision, every calculated step of her demonstration. The room was thick with heat and tension. Sweat glistened on every SEAL's brow, their uniforms soaked, and muscles trembling from the grueling physical test Riley had just led them through. Breathing came in ragged bursts, and the competitive arrogance that had filled the room earlier was now replaced with a raw, humbling mixture of exhaustion, awe, and disbelief. Riley stepped forward, her calm presence cutting through the heavy air. She picked up a rifle from the rack, its polished metal gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The SEAL's eyes followed her every move, some narrowing with suspicion, others widening with anticipation. One of the younger SEALs whispered to his neighbor, barely audible, "She's going to shoot." The senior SEAL, still catching his breath, muttered, "I've seen her handle weapons before, but this is different." Riley's stance was flawless. She aligned her posture, feet firmly planted, rifle steady against her shoulder. Her breathing slowed, measured, almost hypnotic in its calmness. Every SEAL in the room felt the silent intensity radiating from her. She didn't glance at them. She didn't need to. The rifle, the target, and her focus were all that mattered. The target board stood at the far end of the room, marked with varying distances and angles, a test of precision, accuracy, and mental composure. Riley's eyes scanned it briefly, calculating the trajectory, the weight, the distance, and even the environmental variables in the room, from the light flickering overhead to the subtle draft from the ventilation system. Then, without a word, she fired. The sound of the rifle echoed sharply, cutting through the room like a knife. The first bullet hit the bullseye dead center. Silence followed, thick and stunned. The SEALs exchanged incredulous glances, unsure if what they had seen was real. Riley adjusted her aim and fired again, another perfect hit. And again, A third, fourth, fifth. Each shot landed with surgical precision, the bullets forming a perfect line of impeccable accuracy. No hesitation, no error. The SEALs, trained to handle weapons under extreme stress, could barely believe their eyes. One SEAL finally spoke, voice trembling, she's perfect. Another muttered under his breath, I didn't think anyone could do that, not even in training, not even in the field. Riley didn't flinch, didn't gloat. Her expression remained calm, almost serene, as if the feat she had just accomplished was merely routine, a quiet display of the skill and discipline she had honed over years of service. But the impact on the room was anything but routine. The senior SEAL who had mocked her at the beginning of the day stepped forward, jaw tight, his voice unsteady. I didn't expect that. Riley lowered the rifle, her eyes locking onto his. Expectations are dangerous, she said softly. They blind you to reality, and in combat, blind spots will get you killed. Skill isn't enough. You need precision, control, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. That is how respect is earned. The words hung in the air, echoing in the minds of every operator present. They had trained for years, survived combat, and yet here stood a Marine, bruised and underestimated, who had just demonstrated a level of skill and control that surpassed even the most elite among them. Riley turned to the rest of the room, her gaze sweeping over the exhausted, humbled men. You've seen what focus and discipline can achieve. You've seen what composure under pressure looks like. And now, you've seen what happens when skill is combined with experience and unwavering determination. The SEALs absorbed her words, some nodding slowly, others simply staring, speechless. The shift in the room was palpable. Arrogance and bravado had been replaced with respect, deep, grudging, and undeniable. But Riley wasn't finished. She placed the rifle back on the rack and stepped closer to the SEAL who had first mocked her. You believed my bruise made me weak, she said quietly, yet every word carried the weight of authority. You believed you could dismiss me, underestimate me, or think less of me because of appearances. You were wrong, completely wrong. The man swallowed hard, his previous confidence shattered. He wanted to argue, to deflect, but he couldn't. He simply nodded, a gesture heavy with reluctant acknowledgement. Riley's eyes softened just slightly, not in weakness but in quiet resolution. This isn't about proving dominance, she continued. It's about showing what true respect looks like in action. Not words, not rank, not bravado. Action, skill, discipline, leadership. That is how respect is earned, and that is how it is given. The younger SEALs, who had been gawking in awe, finally started to grasp the lesson. Their laughter, their casual arrogance, their previous attempts at mockery, all had been stripped away by one woman's calm, precise execution of skill. And in that realization they felt something new, humility. Then Riley did something unexpected. She walked back to the center of the room and picked up a small folder, mission data she had been reviewing earlier. Respect, she said, her voice quiet but commanding, is also proven when you lead others. When you step into the fire, make decisions under pressure, and protect your team. You can be the best shot, the strongest operator, or the fastest runner, but if you cannot lead, none of it matters. She placed the folder on the table with deliberate care, her eyes meeting every SEAL in the room. Today, you've witnessed my skills, but skills without leadership are hollow. Leadership without respect is empty. And respect, she added, locking eyes with the senior SEAL who had doubted her, is never assumed. It is earned through action, through courage, and through integrity. The senior SEAL swallowed, his pride crumbling in the wake of undeniable truth. I respect you, he admitted quietly, his voice strained. It was more than acknowledgement. It was a surrender to the lesson Riley had been imparting all day. Riley's gaze softened, a small, controlled smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Good, but understand this, respect is not permanent. It is constantly tested, challenged, and proven. Today was a start. Tomorrow the world will demand more, and you will either rise or you will falter. The SEALs were silent, the weight of her words sinking deep. The room that had once been filled with arrogance, laughter, and mockery was now transformed. There was awe, yes, but also something heavier. The understanding that they had been humbled by one Marine, who refused to be underestimated and had proven her worth beyond any doubt. Then Riley did something that left the room in final, stunned silence. She picked up the rifle again, aimed one final shot at a small target set at an impossible angle, and fired. The bullet struck dead center, perfectly, silently proving that even under fatigue, stress, and scrutiny, her composure was absolute. The SEALs could only watch. The lesson was complete. Respect was not a gift. It was earned through precision, courage, endurance, and unyielding leadership. And yet, just as the room began to absorb this revelation, Riley's communicator buzzed quietly. She glanced at it, eyes narrowing slightly. Something had come through, a message that wasn't part of the exercise. She didn't speak immediately, simply holding it in her hand, letting the SEALs wonder. Had the lesson ended, or was there more to come? The sudden buzz of Riley's communicator sliced through the room like a warning bell. Every SEAL and Marine instinctively straightened, adrenaline kicking back into overdrive. The exercises, the demonstrations, the lessons, they had all been intense, yes, but this was something different. This was real. Riley glanced down at the screen. The message was brief, terse, and urgent. Possible security breach detected near eastern perimeter. Immediate assessment required. Her jaw tightened just slightly, not in fear but in focus. This was no drill. This was reality. The SEALs, still reeling from the physical and strategic humiliation she had delivered, watched her reaction closely. Some were confused, others wary. Riley was calm, but there was a flicker in her eyes that signaled authority, command authority, born of countless real-life scenarios where hesitation meant death. "Report," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. It was calm, but it carried the unmistakable weight of command. One of the younger SEALs, still breathless from the last challenge, swallowed hard. "Sensors indicate movement, unauthorized access, possibly hostile, not confirmed." Riley nodded once sharply. "We move as a unit. Everyone follows protocol exactly. Errors are not tolerated." The senior SEAL, the one who had mocked her earlier, stepped forward, attempting to mask his respect with an almost casual tone. "Captain, do you want us to?" Riley's gaze locked on him. It was steady, unwavering, piercing. "Do not assume authority you do not have. This is my assessment. Follow my lead." The SEAL's jaw tightened. He had learned humility the hard way today. Riley's command wasn't a suggestion. It was law in that moment. He nodded reluctantly, a mix of respect and residual pride. The room was tense. Every man knew that any hesitation now could mean failure. Riley moved quickly but methodically, signaling the SEALs to follow her. They reached the eastern perimeter in minutes. The scene was unnervingly quiet. Shadows stretched across the compound, and the usual hum of activity seemed muted, as if the world itself had taken a breath, waiting. "Divide into teams," Riley instructed. "Recon first. Observe and report. No engagement unless necessary. Precision and control, always control." The SEALs split, their usual confidence tempered by the exhaustion of the previous exercises and the clear competence Riley had demonstrated. They moved quickly but carefully, following every subtle command, every unspoken expectation she projected. Riley stayed at the central point, monitoring every movement. Her communicator crackled softly with updates from her teams. The tension was suffocating. One wrong move, one missed sign, and the consequences could be catastrophic. Suddenly, a signal came in, a blurry figure moving across the perimeter, staying just out of clear view. Riley's eyes narrowed. She analyzed the movement patterns quickly, calculating trajectories, estimating timing, and preparing contingency plans, all without hesitation. The senior SEAL, unable to suppress his lingering skepticism, muttered, "It's just shadows. We've seen this 100 times." Riley didn't respond immediately. She simply raised a hand, signaling him to hold. Her voice, calm but cutting, finally broke the tense quiet. Shadows or threats, we treat both the same. Hesitation gets people killed. Watch closely. Within seconds, the figure shifted, attempting to breach a secondary perimeter. Riley's team reacted instantly, moving with coordination that the SEALs could only describe as flawless. One SEAL, who had been skeptical, whispered under his breath, I've never seen anything like this." Riley herself moved forward, precise and deliberate. She coordinated communications, monitored sensor feeds, and issued instructions with exact timing. The intruder, realizing the perimeter was actively monitored, attempted to flee, but Riley had anticipated this. She dispatched a small interception team, her voice calm, clear, and commanding over the radio. Within moments, the intruder was contained, not with brute force but with calculated precision, strategy, and leadership under pressure. The SEALs, who had once doubted her, were now forced to acknowledge the full weight of her competence. The senior SEAL finally spoke, voice low, tinged with awe. "Captain, that was impeccable. You saw the movement before it happened. You predicted every possible exit. I can't believe it." Riley turned her gaze on him, calm but firm. Prediction is a product of observation, preparation, and experience. Leadership is earned in moments like these, not in empty posturing. Another SEAL muttered, almost grudgingly, "We underestimated you. I can't believe how wrong we were." Riley's eyes scanned the room again. Sweat streaked her uniform from the physical tests earlier, yet she moved with poise, her calm presence asserting authority that no words alone could command. "Respect," she said, quiet but resonant, "is not a gift. It is earned through skill, courage, and consistency under pressure. You have seen what that looks like today. Remember it." For the first time, the SEALs fully grasped the breadth of her ability, not just her physical or tactical skill, but the leadership, composure, and decisiveness that defined her. They had witnessed her strategic mastery, her flawless execution in the demonstration, and now her command in a real-world scenario under pressure. Riley didn't linger on praise or acknowledgement. The lesson was complete, but the air still buzzed with adrenaline. She moved to the center of the perimeter, looking over her team, over the SEALs, and then back at the restrained intruder. Calmly, methodically, she issued orders for extraction, ensuring every step adhered to protocol. Every man, every Marine and SEAL followed without hesitation. Finally, the breach was resolved. The room, now filled with SEALs still processing the rapid events, was silent. Awe, respect, and something heavier, understanding, hung over them. The man who had mocked her at the start approached, cautiously, his voice steady but tinged with humility. "Captain Morgan," he said, you've earned my respect. Not just for today or for the demonstrations, but for how you lead under pressure. I misjudged you." Riley didn't smile widely, didn't gloat. She simply nodded, calm and assured. Leadership isn't about ego or appearances or intimidation. It's about action, clarity, and protecting those under your command. Today, you've witnessed that. A younger SEAL, still catching his breath, whispered, "I never thought I'd see a Marine command a room of SEALs, and then lead in real time like that. I can't believe it." Riley's gaze swept the group, lingering on the senior SEAL who had mocked her first. "Respect," she said softly, "is proven in action, and never forget it must be continuously earned. You've seen only a fraction of it today." As the SEALs absorbed the lesson, a subtle tension remained. They had been humbled, awed, and educated, but there was still one final, unspoken question. What else was Riley capable of? Could they, the elite warriors of the Navy, match her in skill, leadership, or resolve? The answer remained uncertain, and that uncertainty only deepened the room's suspense. Just as the team began to regroup, Riley's communicator buzzed again. She glanced at it, her eyes narrowing slightly. Another alert, another challenge. This time it was external, urgent, and potentially dangerous. Her voice was calm, quiet, but carried a lethal authority. "Prepare for deployment," she said. "This isn't a drill. Move with precision. Follow my lead exactly." The SEALs, exhausted, awed, and humbled, didn't hesitate. They moved as one, following her without question. The lesson was no longer theoretical. It was alive, immediate, and unforgiving. The tension in the room was palpable. Riley's calm command had transformed the previously arrogant SEALs into a disciplined, focused unit, yet the buzz from her communicator reminded them that the lesson was far from over. The live scenario awaiting them was no simulation. It was real. Every step, every decision could mean success or failure, and Riley's gaze reflected a level of intensity that no man in the room had ever encountered. "Gear up," Riley commanded, her voice precise. "This is not training. This is reality. Composure under pressure will determine the outcome." The SEALs moved efficiently, adrenaline surging through their exhausted bodies. Sweat from the previous physical test clung to their uniforms, their muscles still trembling from exertion, but every man followed Riley's lead without hesitation. The respect she had earned earlier today had cemented their loyalty. There was no questioning her authority, only action. Outside the compound, the scenario unfolded. Intelligence had indicated an unknown hostile force attempting to breach a secure area critical to national operations. Riley's role was not merely to observe. She was to lead, to strategize, and to execute under pressure, coordinating the SEALs and any support teams on site. Riley quickly assessed the situation, her mind calculating variables at lightning speed: terrain, potential threats, civilian proximity, escape routes, and timing. Every decision had to be perfect, every command precise. One misstep could compromise the mission and put lives at risk. She split the SEALs into 3 tactical teams, each with a clear objective. Alpha will flank the eastern approach. Bravo will secure the perimeter and establish observation posts. Charlie follows me, precision engagement only. Do not engage unless necessary. Her instructions were calm but unyielding, leaving no room for doubt. The teams moved with synchronized efficiency, each SEAL executing their role flawlessly under her guidance. Riley herself led Charlie, moving like a shadow through the terrain, silent and precise, eyes scanning every corner, every potential threat. Suddenly, a signal came through the comms: movement near the eastern perimeter. Riley immediately ordered Alpha to intercept. Using hand signals and subtle cues, she coordinated the teams without broadcasting their strategy to the unknown adversary. The tension escalated as the hostile force attempted to breach the perimeter. The SEALs moved under Riley's direction like a single organism, silent and lethal. They navigated obstacles, covered angles, and communicated with minimal noise. Every decision Riley had made earlier, every tactical lesson, every observation was now in action, guiding them toward success. The first confrontation occurred when Alpha engaged a hostile target attempting to bypass the perimeter. Riley observed through her optics, noting every move, ready to intervene if necessary. Alpha neutralized the threat, but Riley immediately adjusted Bravo's position to prevent secondary threats from emerging. Her awareness of the battlefield was unmatched, her strategy proactive rather than reactive. Charlie, under Riley's direct guidance, approached the main breach point. Her eyes scanned every shadow, every doorway, every cover. She moved with the calm precision of someone who had faced countless life-or-death scenarios. The SEALs, watching her in awe, began to realize something profound. Riley's skill wasn't just in physical ability, it was her ability to think 10 steps ahead under extreme pressure. Then the situation escalated further. Sensors detected multiple hostile targets converging on a secondary entry point. Riley quickly calculated the timing, adjusted team positions, and coordinated a flanking maneuver. "Precision engagement only," she reminded them. "Do not act prematurely." The SEALs executed her commands flawlessly. Every shot, every movement, every decision reflected the discipline and clarity she demanded. The hostile targets were neutralized systematically, with minimal risk to the team and surrounding area. During the final phase of the engagement, Riley led Charlie to secure the main breach point. The SEALs were tense, muscles screaming from fatigue, but they followed without hesitation. Riley's calm presence kept them focused, each man relying on her judgment and experience. She guided them through each step, from clearing obstacles to maintaining cover to coordinating timing with Alpha and Bravo. Finally, the operation concluded. The breach was contained, threats neutralized, and the area secured. Every SEAL, exhausted and exhilarated, looked to Riley for guidance. She had not only led them through a complex tactical situation but had done so with precision, composure, and foresight that none of them had anticipated. The senior SEAL who had doubted her earlier approached cautiously, his respect evident. "Captain Morgan, I've seen a lot in my career, but I've never witnessed leadership like that. You're remarkable." Riley nodded, her expression calm but resolute. Leadership is not about proving dominance. It's about protecting your team, making calculated decisions, and staying composed under pressure. Respect is earned through action, not words. Today, you've seen what that means in practice. A younger SEAL, still catching his breath, added quietly, "I didn't think anyone could do what you just did. Not even us, not even a room full of SEALs." Riley's gaze swept the team, a quiet intensity in her eyes. "Remember this feeling, the adrenaline, the tension, the clarity under pressure. That is what leadership under fire looks like. And it's not just skill, it's awareness, discipline, and integrity combined. If you take anything from today, let it be that respect, trust, and leadership are inseparable." There was a pause. Every SEAL absorbed her words, the weight of the lesson settling in. Riley had not only outperformed them physically, mentally, and strategically, she had led them through a real, high-stakes operation. Their arrogance had been stripped away. Their respect had been earned, not just through demonstration but through action in the field. But Riley wasn't done. Even as the adrenaline faded, her communicator buzzed once more. Another alert, less urgent but impossible to ignore. She glanced at it, expression narrowing slightly. The day's lessons were over, but the challenges of leadership never truly ended. She looked over the SEALs, her calm authority unshaken. "Today, you learned what it means to earn respect. But understand this, leadership doesn't stop when the mission ends. It continues in every decision, every moment, every action. Carry that with you." The SEALs nodded, still catching their breath. Their eyes reflected awe, humility, and something deeper, an unspoken acknowledgement that Riley had shattered every preconceived notion they had about hierarchy, strength, and leadership. As they began to regroup and debrief, Riley's gaze lingered on the senior SEAL. "You doubted me," she said quietly, "and that doubt cost you insight. Never underestimate anyone, especially those who lead with integrity and skill." He swallowed hard, nodding. "Understood, Captain Morgan. I will never make that mistake again." Riley's expression softened slightly, though her eyes remained sharp. "Good, because leadership is tested every day. It doesn't end here. Today, you've witnessed the standard. Now it's up to you to live up to it." The team began to move back toward the compound, exhaustion heavy in their steps, yet their spirits undeniably changed. The lessons of strategy, precision, endurance, and leadership had been hammered home in the crucible of demonstration and real-world engagement. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the perimeter, Riley paused for a moment. Her eyes scanned the horizon, calculating, anticipating, always aware. The SEALs followed, understanding that the day's trials had been more than tests. They had been a masterclass in leadership under fire. And as they walked together back to base, one thought ran through every operator's mind. This woman, bruised, underestimated, and relentless, had rewritten the definition of respect and leadership for every SEAL in that room. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting the compound in an eerie twilight. Shadows stretched long across the training grounds, and the adrenaline from the day's exercises still pulsed in the veins of the SEALs. Exhaustion weighed heavily on them, but beneath it simmered a new, unspoken energy: respect, curiosity, and humility. Riley stood at the center of the grounds, her stance calm, her uniform damp with sweat but pristine in its composure. Every bruise, every mark from the morning's physical tests was a silent testament to her journey, a visual reminder that strength could coexist with resilience and grace. The SEALs, now fully attentive, circled around her. Some leaned on their knees, gasping for breath. Others simply stood, eyes wide, still processing the whirlwind of strategy, endurance, and real-world engagement they had witnessed. Today had been a relentless lesson, one they would never forget. Riley raised her hand for silence. "Today," she began, voice calm yet commanding, "you've been tested in ways you never anticipated. Intellect, endurance, strategy, leadership under pressure. You've seen how a single individual can challenge assumptions, dismantle arrogance, and earn respect, not through rank or reputation, but through action, composure, and unwavering integrity." The SEALs were silent, absorbing every word. There was no bravado in Riley's tone, only clarity and authority. She walked slowly among them, stopping in front of the senior SEAL who had mocked her first. "You assumed my bruise meant weakness. You assumed your training, your reputation, and your experience would shield you from challenge. And you were wrong, completely wrong." The SEAL swallowed hard, his pride crumbling. I misjudged you, Captain. I see that now." Riley's gaze softened just slightly. "Good, because recognizing mistakes is the first step toward growth. Leadership, respect, and trust are earned continuously. They are never automatic, and those who assume them without effort, those who rely solely on past accolades or ego, will be humbled eventually." Her eyes scanned the group. "The lesson isn't simply about me. It's about how you lead, how you inspire, and how you earn trust in every action, every decision, every moment. A SEAL, a Marine, or any leader in any capacity, your team is watching, and they will judge not by words but by deeds, by how you act when under pressure, how you respond to failure, and how you guide those who follow you." One of the younger SEALs, still trembling from fatigue, asked quietly, "Captain, how do you stay so calm, so in control?" Riley's eyes held his. "Control is earned through preparation, through knowing your limits, and through understanding your environment and yourself. Calm doesn't come from absence of danger, it comes from mastery of it. Today, you've seen what happens when preparation, skill, and composure converge." She paused, letting her words settle over the room. The SEALs absorbed it fully, the weight of every lesson, every demonstration, every tactical exercise, and the live operational challenge. Each had chipped away at their arrogance and left in its place something far more enduring: humility, respect, and insight. Riley's gaze returned to the senior SEAL. "You've led teams, survived combat, and faced unimaginable pressure," she said, voice quiet but firm. "But the day's lessons show that even the most skilled and decorated are not immune to humility. Respect is not given, it is proven repeatedly through action." He nodded slowly, the shift in him complete. "I understand. Today you've earned my respect, every bit of it." Riley allowed a small, controlled nod. "Good, but remember, this respect is not static. Tomorrow, in another challenge under different pressure, your team will look to you again. Your actions will be judged. Never assume you have earned it permanently. Respect, leadership, and trust are living things. They grow, they are challenged, and they must be continuously proven." The SEALs were silent, digesting the gravity of her words. Riley continued, walking slowly along the line of her now humbled, attentive team. "Leadership is not about ego, rank, or dominance. It's about presence, guidance, and the ability to remain composed under chaos. It's about knowing when to act, when to listen, and when to lead. Today, you have witnessed that presence, and now you must carry it forward." She paused, letting her gaze rest on the younger SEALs who had doubted themselves earlier. "You are strong, skilled, and capable, but strength without composure is wasted. Skill without guidance is meaningless, and leadership without respect is empty. You've seen how each of these pieces fits together today. A hushed awe filled the group. Some could not speak, still reeling from the day's physical, strategic, and psychological lessons. Others simply nodded, humbled, yet inspired, realizing that the hierarchy and ego they had assumed was secondary to skill, discipline, and integrity. Then Riley raised her voice slightly, not with anger but with deliberate intensity. Remember this day. Remember how a single individual, underestimated, bruised, and doubted, can command respect through relentless competence, clarity, and composure. Let it remind you never to underestimate anyone. And let it remind you that leadership, respect, and excellence are always earned, never assumed. The SEALs absorbed the weight of her words. It wasn't a lecture, it was a lived demonstration, a masterclass in humility, discipline, and authority. They had been tested mentally, physically, and strategically. They had followed her lead in a real-world scenario, and they had emerged changed, not just in perception of her but in their understanding of leadership itself. Finally, Riley stepped back and looked at the horizon, the setting sun casting long shadows over the compound. The day's lessons were complete, yet the implications stretched far beyond the training grounds. She had shown them skill, endurance, precision, strategy, and leadership in ways that no manual, no lecture, and no rank could ever convey. The senior SEAL approached her once more, voice low but sincere. "Captain Morgan, today, you didn't just teach us. You transformed us. I can't imagine anyone in this room questioning your abilities ever again." Riley's calm gaze met his. "Good. Let it remain a lesson not just for today but for every day forward. Leadership, respect, and trust are built one action at a time. Never forget that." The SEALs fell silent, the weight of respect settling fully over them. They had witnessed an extraordinary demonstration, not just of skill, but of leadership under pressure, composure under chaos, and integrity in action. Every lesson had been reinforced. Respect is earned, leadership is proven, and excellence is demonstrated through consistent action. As they began to regroup, packing up equipment and returning to the base, one of the younger SEALs whispered to his teammate, "I've never seen anyone like her, not in training, not in operations. She's unstoppable." The senior SEAL nodded quietly, a rare, genuine smile tugging at his lips. "She didn't just outclass us. She redefined what it means to lead." Riley didn't hear them. She moved with purpose, calm and steady, already preparing for the next mission, the next challenge. She had earned their respect, not through rank, not through intimidation, not through ego, but through unwavering competence, composure, and mastery of her craft. And as the night fell over the compound, the SEALs understood something profound. A leader's true power is not in domination, but in presence, discipline, and the ability to earn respect through relentless action. The day was over, but its lessons would echo forever. Riley had walked in bruised, underestimated, and doubted. She had left commanding not just respect, but awe, transforming a room of the Navy's elite into believers, learners, and humbled warriors. And in that moment, it was undeniable. No one would forget the Marine who had rewritten the rules of respect, leadership, and excellence.